When we learned about Python functions, we took an example of calculate function where we defined individual functions for various operations like add, subtract, multiply, and divide. These are simple functions, they just have a return statement. Can't we write this in a single line? We can, using lambda functions. The syntax for lambda function is use the keyword lambda, followed by the arguments that you want to pass to the function, followed by a colon, and then the expression that returns a value. Let's try to convert these functions using lambda function. I'll use the keyword lambda, followed by the arguments. What are the arguments for the add function? Basically two numbers. I'll name those parameters or arguments as a comma b followed by a colon. And what are we trying to return in this function? The addition of two arguments. So a plus b. Now our lambda function is ready that adds the arguments. Let's store this in a variable. I'll name it as add1. Now let me call that function, and to print the value I'll use print add 1 of 1 comma 2. Let's save this and run the program. 1 plus 2 is 3. So we got the output. Let's try to convert subtract and multiply also. I'll just copy paste these twice and I'll name these variables subtract 1 and multiply 1. Subtract will simply return a minus b and multiply will simply return a into b. And let's copy paste the print as well. Subtract 1 of 1 comma 2, multiply 1 of 1 comma 2. Let's see the output. So the addition of 1 comma 2 is 3, subtraction of 1 comma 2 is minus 1, multiplication of 1 comma 2 is 2. These functions were simple to convert, but how do we convert this divide function? It has if-else statements here. We can convert this as well. Let me use the keyword lambda followed by the arguments a comma b. And what are we supposed to return here? If the second parameter or second argument is 0, we simply return 0. Otherwise, we perform the division operation. And how do we do this in a single line? This can be done using a ternary operator. We'll discuss more about ternary operator in our upcoming videos, but for now, just remember this syntax. The syntax for ternary operator is first will return the true value, basically the value that you want to return when the condition evaluates to true, followed by an if keyword and the condition. Then we use else. If the condition fails, it would enter this block and will put a false value here. Let's try to implement this for this logic. So what is the value that I want to return? It's 0. And when do I want to return this? When second argument is equal to 0, which is b equals 0. If this condition is false, then we want to return the operation, division operation. So I'll store this in divide 1. So what's happening here is divide 1 is a lambda function which takes two parameters a and b. If the second parameter is 0, it returns 0. Otherwise, it performs division operation and returns the value. Now let's try to print this. I'll simply copy this and rename multiply with divide. Let's try to run this, and 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. Let me write another function called message, which would simply print hello. How do we convert this into a lambda function? I'll use the variable message1 equals lambda. Since we are not passing any arguments to this function, I'll simply put a colon here, and we're not returning anything, we're just printing this statement. So I'll just simply put print. Now I'll call this function message. Since we already have a print statement here, we don't need to print this function. So I'll simply call it, and yes, we see the output hello. Remember that the lambda functions are also known as anonymous functions because we don't define any name to this function. To perform complex operations, always prefer actual functions using the def keyword followed by the function name, passing the arguments, and then writing your code. If it's a simple operation like this, then you can prefer using lambda functions. Now that you have learned about lambda functions, try to find the square of a number using lambda function and share your answer in the comment section.